The broadcast did not begin with music. It began with every screen on Earth going black at the same time. Phones died mid-call. News anchors froze beneath studio lights. Hospital monitors blinked once, then returned with a symbol no human government had ever seen, a pale circle split by a blade of blue fire. Then the voice arrived. It did not shout. That was the first thing people remembered later. It spoke with the calm of something that had never needed to raise its voice. We have studied 847 civilizations. Across Earth, children stopped crying because their parents had gone still. Soldiers in orbital defense bunkers looked at targeting boards that showed nothing to shoot at. In a hospice ward outside Edinburgh, a nurse named Eleanor Marsh tightened her fingers around an old woman's hand and looked up at the dead television mounted in the corner of room 7. We have broken warriors by sending warriors. We have broken kings by sending kings. We have broken prophets by proving their gods were silent. The old woman in the bed breathed through dry lips. Ellie did not move. Her tea thermos sat beside the chair, unopened. Her uniform was wrinkled from a 12-hour night shift that had become 14. There was a bruise-colored shadow beneath both eyes, and a small coffee stain near her left pocket where a patient had apologized 3 times for a shaking hand. The voice continued. Humanity was first classified as aggressive, then adaptive, then irrational. These classifications are incomplete. On the television, the symbol widened. Behind it appeared a face. Not human. Not close enough to pretend. Tall skull. Silver-black skin. Eyes like polished stone underwater. Every line of him looked carved for command, yet his expression carried no anger at all. That made him worse. I am Vale Theron of the Ascendancy Fleet. I have ended the resistance of species older than your continents. I have watched empires surrender after a single hour of correct pressure. Ellie heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Nurses. Orderlies. Someone whispering a prayer too fast. The woman in the bed opened her eyes. Dorothy Kavanaugh was 81 years old, though cancer had made her look smaller than age ever could. Everyone called her Dot. 3 hours earlier, she had been half inside sleep, half somewhere beyond it, asking Ellie whether the rain had stopped. Now she was awake. The alien spoke again. We searched for the center of your species. Not your armies. Not your leaders. Not your scientists. Those are obvious pillars, and obvious pillars are never where a structure truly fails. Ellie looked at Dot's face. Dot looked back. A faint smile moved across the old woman's mouth, almost too tired to exist. They found you then? Dot whispered. Ellie swallowed once. On every screen on Earth, Vale Theron's face leaned closer. We found something stranger. A profession built around voluntary proximity to the dying. Humans who sit beside failing bodies without strategic gain. Humans who hold hands at the edge of biological termination and call it comfort. The room seemed to lose temperature. Ellie felt Dot's fingers press weakly against hers. No sane species institutionalizes grief unless grief is necessary to its obedience. Vale Theron paused long enough for the sentence to enter every home, every shelter, every operating theater, every bunker. Then he said the line that made 1 billion people hate him before they knew his name. Any species that needs a hand to hold while dying must also need one while surrendering. In room 7, something small and sharp changed in Ellie's eyes. Not fear. Not rage either. Recognition. She had heard men speak confidently about death before. Consultants with polished shoes. Relatives who had not visited in 6 months. Priests who spoke too loudly near bedsides. People who thought death became simple because they had found words large enough to stand far away from it. Vale Theron was another one. Only taller. Only armed with a fleet. The television flickered. Eleanor Marsh. Hospice nurse. 47 years old. 22 years in service. 1 daughter. No military training. No political authority. No defensive value. Dot's hand tightened. Ellie did not look away from the screen. You have been selected as humanity's representative. The hallway outside erupted. Someone shouted her name. Someone else dropped a metal tray, and the crash rang down the ward like a gunshot. Margaret Osei appeared in the doorway, young face pale, hair half-tied, 1 glove still on. Ellie. On screen, Vale Theron's voice lowered. Come willingly or we will demonstrate necessity. For 3 seconds, Ellie remained seated. The whole planet watched a tired nurse beside a dying woman. Then Dot lifted her hand from the blanket with effort and tapped Ellie's knuckles. Go on, Beta, she whispered. I'm all right. Ellie looked down at her. That was not all right. They both knew that. That had not been all right for weeks. Her pain medicine sat logged in plastic cups. Her daughter was driving north and might not arrive in time. Her breaths had begun spacing themselves in ways Ellie knew too well. Still Dot smiled. Margaret can sit with me. Margaret's eyes filled before she nodded. I'll stay, she said. I won't leave her. Ellie stood slowly. No dramatic speech. No final goodbye. She leaned over Dot, adjusted the blanket at her shoulder, checked the line at her wrist, and brushed one thin strand of hair away from the old woman's cheek. The world watched those hands. They were not soldiers' hands. Not soft hands either. Clean nails. Dry skin. A small burn near the thumb from hospital tea. Hands that had washed bodies, lifted cups, closed curtains, pressed call buttons, held families upright when legs failed underneath them. Ellie picked up her thermos. At the doorway, Margaret stepped aside. What do I tell them? Margaret asked. Ellie stopped. For a moment, her tiredness showed completely. Not weakness. Wait. The kind that comes from carrying too many last words and remembering all of them. Tell Dot's daughter the rain stopped, Ellie said. Then she walked toward the light gathering at the end of the hall. The light at the end of the hospice corridor did not move like light. It waited. Ellie walked toward it with her thermos in one hand and Margaret's voice behind her, already speaking softly to Dot. That was the first thing Vale Theron's machines recorded. Not panic. Not prayer. Continuity. The nurse left one dying woman only after another human took her place. The corridor folded. For half a second, the ward stretched like a reflection in deep water. Then the floor vanished beneath Ellie's shoes, the walls became stars, and cold air struck her lungs hard enough to make her breath catch. She did not scream. Her shoulder hit something solid. A surface caught her before she fell. When her sight cleared, Earth was gone. She stood inside a chamber larger than any cathedral she had ever entered. Silver walkways curved above her like exposed bones. Thousands of alien figures occupied the tiers, silent and still, watching one woman in a wrinkled nurse's uniform steady herself on a black floor polished enough to show her reflection. Ellie looked down. Shoes scuffed. Uniform creased. Hospital badge still clipped to her chest. The badge had turned sideways. She fixed it. A low disturbance moved through the chamber. Not sound exactly. Attention. At the far end, a chair waited beneath a column of pale light. It was not built for comfort. It was built to make the person sitting in it look examined. Ellie walked to it. No one commanded her. No one touched her. No weapon pointed visibly at her, which meant the weapons were hidden or unnecessary. She had seen that kind of room before. Consultation rooms where families were told the scan had spread. Offices where men used calm voices because the decision had already been made. Places arranged to make power look like furniture. Ellie sat down. The chair was too tall. Her feet reached the floor only just. She set the thermos beside her right shoe, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at the alien tiers one by one. The broadcast followed everything. Across Earth, people saw her exactly as she was. Not heroic. Not armored. A tired middle-aged nurse under impossible lights, waiting with the patience of someone used to delays no one apologized for. Then Vale Theron entered. The chamber did not announce him. It adjusted for him. Aliens lowered their heads. The pale column over Ellie's chair narrowed. The air tightened as he crossed the floor, tall enough that his shadow reached her before he did. Behind him walked a smaller alien carrying a thin slate against his chest. Dras. His eyes moved constantly. Ellie. The chair. The thermos. Ellie's hands. Back to the thermos again. Vale Theron stopped 3 steps away. For a long moment he did not look at her. He looked at the broadcast lens instead, as if Ellie were evidence laid on a table. Observe the selection. No rank. No command authority. No history of violence. Minimal physical threat. Ellie rubbed one thumb across the back of her other hand. Vale Theron's gaze finally lowered. Do you know why you are here? Yes, Ellie said. Her voice came out rough. Too little sleep. Too much tea. Too many hours speaking softly in rooms where loudness felt like trespass. You understand you speak before your entire world. I guessed. Then choose precision. Ellie looked past him, up through the dark ribs of the chamber. I know why you think I'm here. Dras made a mark on his slate. Vale Theron became still. And why is that? Because you think sitting with dying people makes me easy to frighten. The mark on Dras's slate stopped halfway. A few heads in the tiers shifted. Vale Theron studied her face, perhaps searching for defiance, perhaps for rehearsed courage. Ellie gave him neither. Are you afraid? He asked. Ellie considered the question properly. That irritated him more than a quick denial would have. She looked down at her hands. There was a faint half-moon dent near her palm where Dot's fingernail had pressed earlier. I'm tired, she said. Different thing. The chamber held the answer for several seconds. Dras wrote it down slowly. Vale Theron turned his head slightly toward the analyst. Baseline response abnormal. Dras looked up. Recorded. Ellie leaned back as much as the chair allowed. Is this going to take long? A tremor moved through the tears. Offense. Astonishment. Maybe both. Vale Theron stepped closer. You are aboard the command vessel of the Ascendancy Fleet. Your planet remains alive because I have not yet given a final instruction. Ellie nodded once, as if acknowledging a doctor explaining a procedure. Then you should probably get on with it. The first visible crack in Vale Theron's composure was not anger. It was delay. His reply came one breath late. You mistake calm for control. No, Ellie said. I know what control looks like. And what is control, Eleanor Marsh? She looked at him fully. Keeping your voice steady when someone asks if it will hurt. No one in the chamber moved. On Earth, in hospital break rooms and crowded flats and military stations, people stopped whispering. Vale Theron did not understand the sentence. Not completely. His eyes shifted once toward Drass, as if the analyst might provide the missing weapon inside it. Drass did not. For the first time since Ellie had arrived, the young alien was not writing. Vale Theron lifted one long hand. Begin the first pressure sequence. The floor beneath Ellie's chair became transparent. Not glass. Memory. Below her opened a world burning from orbit. Continents glowed red at the edges. Cities collapsed inward like embers. Oceans lifted into steam. Above the dying planet hung ships by the thousand, each releasing thin white lines through atmosphere, land, bone, history. The image was too vast for the mind to hold. So the mind found details. A bridge curling in heat. A tower falling without sound. Small shapes running across a square until the light reached them. This was Kavaris, Vale Theron said. Their warriors requested honorable combat. We showed them scale. The world changed. A moon cracked open. A city drowned. A field of bodies arranged around a monument that no longer had a name. 6 billion dead in 9 minutes. Another world. Another ending. Another silence. The deaths came faster until civilizations appeared and vanished beneath Ellie's feet like breaths on glass. Vale Theron watched her face. The sequence was not simply violence. It was calibrated helplessness. It showed enough detail to make empathy attach, then widened the scale until attachment became unbearable. Ellie did not look away. Her mouth tightened once when a child-shaped figure turned back toward a burning doorway. Her fingers closed around the edge of the chair. But she stayed with it. The sequence ended on a dead planet, its atmosphere stripped into a silver ring. The chamber lights returned. You see what we know of death, Vale Theron said. Ellie stayed quiet. For a moment, it seemed the pressure had worked. Her face had gone pale. Her breathing had changed. Across Earth, millions leaned toward screens, waiting for any proof she was still there. Ellie bent down, picked up her thermos, unscrewed the cup. The small domestic click carried across the command chamber. She poured tea with hands that trembled only slightly, took one sip and looked up at him. Room 4, she said. Drass's slate lifted. James Whitfield. 34. 3 children. 8, 6, and 4. The alien tears remained silent. He knew he wasn't going home. He knew he would never teach the youngest to ride a bike. He knew his 6-year-old would forget the sound of his voice first. He knew the oldest would try to become grown before her bones were ready for it. Ellie held the cup between both hands. He asked me if children remember hands. The chamber seemed to narrow around the sentence. I told him yes. Not all the words. Not every day. But they remember how love felt when it touched them. Vale Theron did not move. He asked me to tell his daughter he was proud of her. He said it twice because the morphine was pulling him under and he was afraid I might miss it. Then he smiled. Not because death was kind. Because he had placed the last thing he could still carry into someone else's hands. She lifted her eyes. And then he closed his. No one in the ascendancy chamber made a sound. Ellie set the cup back on the thermos. So when you show me planets burning from very far away and expect me to collapse under the size of it, I understand why you thought it would work. Her voice stayed quiet. That made it travel farther. But you keep showing me death from the outside. Vale Theron stared at her. I've held it while it was still warm. Drass's pen slipped from his fingers and struck the floor. Vale Theron did not look at the fallen pen. That was how Ellie knew he had noticed it. Drass bent too quickly to retrieve it, the movement sharp and embarrassed, but the chamber had already recorded the sound. A small thing. A thin metal point striking black floor. Yet after worlds had burned beneath Ellie's feet, that was the first noise the ascendancy made by accident. Vale Theron let the silence punish him. Then he turned back to Ellie. You mistake intimacy with death for authority over it. Ellie held the thermos cup in both hands. No, she said. I don't have authority over it. Then you have nothing. She looked down into the tea. It had gone lukewarm. Hospital tea always did that. You poured it because you thought there would be a quiet minute, and then someone needed turning or a family needed explaining, or a daughter arrived too late and asked whether her mother had heard the last message. Ellie had learned to drink tea after it stopped being tea. I have practice, she said. Vale Theron's eyes narrowed. The wall behind him opened into darkness. Not physical darkness. Conceptual. A depth full of diagrams, star maps, decay curves, extinction clocks. Human cities appeared as pale dust on timelines so long they made centuries look like scratches. Then practice this. The projection expanded until Earth floated between them. Blah. Bright. Small. Around it, numbers bloomed in alien script, then translated for the broadcast. Solar expansion event. Planetary habitability collapse. Biospheric failure. Cultural record loss. Species termination. Vale Theron stepped aside so Ellie could see her world under the sentence. Your species speaks as if meaning has weight. It does not. Your sun will enlarge. Your oceans will boil. Your monuments will fracture. Your languages will become radiation-scored residue on dead stone, and then even that stone will be consumed. The projection accelerated. Earth's clouds thinned. Seas withdrew into white vapor. Continents cracked brown and red. Cities became outlines, then stains, then nothing that could be named. Every patient you comforted still died, he said. Every child you reassured will die. Their children will die. Their descendants will die. Your daughter will die. Every memory you think you protected is temporary chemical noise. Drass was writing again but slower now. Vale Theron leaned toward Ellie. Tell your world why any of it matters. Across Earth no one spoke. Not because the argument was new. Because it was old. Every person who had buried someone had heard some version of it in the private courtroom of the mind. Every parent had felt it while watching a child sleep. Every doctor, nurse, soldier, widow, and dying man had met that question in the dark and failed to answer it cleanly. Ellie did not answer cleanly either. She only sat with it. That seemed to disturb Vale Theron more than resistance. You have no rebuttal, he said. I have heard this one before. From whom? People on bad nights. The projection of dead Earth turned slowly behind him. Explain. Ellie rubbed the small burn mark near her thumb. There is a point near the end where some people get angry. Not loud angry. Bigger than that. They look at the ceiling or the window or nothing at all, and they realize the world is going to keep going without asking permission. Their cup will stay on the table. Their shoes will stay under the bed. Someone else will open the curtains in the morning. Her voice thinned but did not break. And they say exactly what you just said. Not with stars and extinction charts. But close enough. Vale Theron waited. Ellie looked at the dead Earth projection. This week 3 people asked me what the point was. Drass's pen slowed. One was a teacher. She kept apologizing because she couldn't remember the names of all her students anymore. One was a man who had not spoken to his brother in 12 years and wanted to know if regret counted as love when there was no time left to prove it. One was James. She paused on the name. He didn't ask if death was fair. He knew it wasn't. He asked if his little boy would still laugh the same after the funeral. The Earth in the projection continued to burn. I couldn't fix that. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't promise him the boy would be fine. So I didn't. Vale Theron's head tilted. What did you offer? The truth. And the truth was? That grief changes the room but it doesn't empty it. For the first time Drass looked up without meaning to. Ellie kept speaking before Vale Theron could interrupt. I told him his children would hurt. I told him there would be mornings when the house felt wrong because one voice was missing. I told him the youngest might forget details and still carry the shape of him. I told him love doesn't become false because it ends. The chamber's lights dimmed again but no one had ordered it. Or perhaps someone had, quietly. Vale Theron watched Ellie the way a tactician watches a battlefield that refuses to form the expected lines. You call that comfort? No, Ellie said. I call it not lying. His fingers flexed once. Your species builds rituals around failure. We build rituals around staying. The dying still die. Yes. The grieving still grieve. Yes. The universe still erases you. Yes. Vale Theron stepped closer. Then nothing has changed. Ellie looked at him for a long moment. Then she asked, when one of your soldiers dies, what happens to the body? The question landed oddly. Several heads and the tears turned. Vale Theron's expression did not change, but Drass's did. Only slightly. A flicker at the mouth. A caution too late. Material is recovered if strategically useful, Vale Theron said. And if not? It remains where it falls. What about their name? Recorded in lost ledgers. Who reads them? No answer came at once. Ellie noticed. So did Earth. So did Drass. Vale Theron's voice hardened. The dead do not require an audience. No, Ellie said. The living do. That sentence did what the burning planets had not. It moved through the chamber like pressure through water. Drass wrote it down, then stopped, then underlined it with a hand that was not entirely steady. Vale Theron turned slightly toward him. Continue sequence. Drass looked at him. The pause was less than a second. It was still a pause. Analyst. Drass lowered his eyes. Continuing. The dead earth vanished. The chamber went black. This time not with images. With absence. Ellie lost sight of her hands first. Then the chair beneath her became only pressure. Then the air filled with sounds too low to be voices and too patterned to be wind. A patient monitor began beeping somewhere in the darkness. Ellie knew it was false. Her body did not. The sound moved behind her left shoulder, exactly where monitors sat in room 7. Then came the wet hitch of someone trying to breathe through fluid. Then a whisper that sounded almost like Dot. Ellie? Her fingers tightened around the empty thermos cup. The voice came again. Ellie, where did you go? On Earth, Margaret Osei stood beside Dot's bed and looked at the screen, horrified, because Dot was asleep in front of her. The sound was manufactured. The cruelty was not. Ellie closed her eyes. There was no practical reason to close them. The darkness was already total. But it gave her one small decision that belonged only to her. She breathed in, held it, breathed out. The alien sounds crawled closer. A child cried once. A man coughed. A woman begged for water. Call bells rang from every direction, overlapping until they became a single metal scream. Vale Theron's voice entered the dark. Presence is fragile. Remove light. Remove certainty. Remove the witness. The human mind begins filling absence with what it fears it abandoned. Ellie did not answer. 2 minutes passed. In the command chamber, the aliens watched biometric readings scroll beside her chair. Heart rate elevated. Respiration controlled. Stress response active. Compliance failure. Drass stared at the final line. Compliance failure. Ellie opened her eyes into darkness. I sat with a man named Arthur Bell during a power cut, she said. The sounds continued, but her voice cut through them because it belonged to a real room. 6 hours. Backup generator failed on the old wing. Storm outside. His family was stuck on the motorway. He was blind by then, but he kept asking whether the lights were still on. The false voices thinned. I told him yes for the first hour. Vale Theron listened from somewhere unseen. Then he asked me not to lie. Ellie swallowed. So I told him no. The room was dark. The machines were dim. The rain was hitting the window hard enough to sound like gravel. And he said he was scared. A faint shape appeared around her chair. Just the edge of her shoulder. I told him I was there. More light returned. Not much. Enough to show her hands. He asked how he could know. The chamber waited. Ellie opened her palm and laid it flat against the arm of the chair, as if placing it back into another hand. I said because I'm still talking. The darkness broke. Lights returned in a hard white rush. Ellie blinked once, then looked straight at Vale Theron. So if this is meant to scare me because it's dark and loud and full of dying voices, you should understand something. She leaned back, exhausted now but steady. I've worked nights. The line was too small to be defiance. That was why it struck harder. Drass lowered his slate. Vale Theron had not moved, yet something in the chamber had shifted around him. The tears no longer watched Ellie as specimen. They watched their commander, waiting for the next pressure sequence as if each one now risked exposing him instead of her. For the first time, Vale Theron seemed aware of the broadcast. Aware that Earth was not watching a nurse break. Earth was watching him fail to understand why she would not. Vale Theron dismissed the darkness with one movement of his hand. The chamber obeyed too quickly. That was the second mistake. Ellie saw it. So did Drass. So did every human watching from Earth who had ever seen someone hide frustration behind efficiency. Vale Theron turned away from her for the first time and walked toward the lower platform where Drass stood with his slate pressed against his chest. Their voices dropped. The broadcast caught them anyway. Report, Vale Theron said. Drass looked at the readings hovering over his slate. Stress response elevated. Fear present. Submission absent. That is not analysis. Drass swallowed. The motion was small, but Ellie had spent 22 years watching throats move around words people were afraid to say. Her fear does not move her away from the source, Drass said. It appears to move her toward it. Vale Theron stared at him. Clarify. Drass glanced once at Ellie, then at the thermos by her foot, then at the millions watching through the broadcast lens. The original Earth report identified attachment as exploitable weakness, dependency, emotional leverage, decision instability under relational threat. I know what you wrote. Yes, Commander. Then improve it. Drass's fingers tightened on the slate. I may have misclassified the structure. The chamber did not move, but the silence changed shape. Vale Theron's voice lowered. Careful. Drass looked down. Too late. The thought had already entered the room. Ellie watched the young alien as if he were another family member beside a bed, trying to decide whether truth would hurt less if delayed. It never did. Vale Theron turned back to her. If death does not move you, we will address what precedes it. The air above Ellie opened. Not into planets. Into records. Human records. Hospital logs. Security images. Public files. Private fragments stolen with surgical precision. A young woman crossing a university courtyard with books against her chest. Brown hair pulled loose by wind. Laughing at something someone said off-screen. Ellie's hand closed around the thermos so fast the metal clicked against her ring. Vale Theron saw it. The whole chamber saw it. On Earth, Sarah Marsh stopped breathing in a crowded dormitory common room as her own face appeared above the alien floor. Vale Theron's eyes stayed on Ellie. Sarah Marsh. 19 years old. University of Edinburgh. Biology. First year. She has your eyes. Ellie did not speak. Her fingers were white around the thermos. At last, Vale Theron had found movement. He stepped closer. We can reach her. The image changed. Sarah entering a lecture hall. Sarah asleep at a desk. Sarah standing under rain outside a bus stop, unaware of the camera angle that should not exist. Ellie's jaw tightened once. Vale Theron watched it with the focus of a hunter seeing blood on snow. Your profession has trained you to tolerate the dying. Your daughter is not dying. Not yet. Drass did not write. Vale Theron continued. Imagine her afraid. Imagine her calling for you. Imagine distance becoming absolute. Imagine knowing your obedience could have prevented it. Ellie stared at Sarah's face. No tea. No answer. No calm line ready. Just a mother looking at her child. For the first time, Earth saw pain break cleanly across her expression. Not theatrical. Worse. Real. Vale Theron lowered his voice. Surrender your species' defensive authority, and she remains untouched. The chamber waited. Ellie looked down at the thermos in her hands. Then she closed her eyes. When she opened them, the pain was still there. It had not vanished. It had been seated. Yes, she said. Vale Theron paused. You accept. No. Ellie looked at him. I accept that you can reach her. Sarah's image hovered between them. I accept that you can hurt her. I accept that I can't stand between her and everything in the universe. Mothers learn that slowly, then all at once. Her voice shook on the last word. But it did not fold. I left her at nursery. I left her at school. I left her in a city with roads and strangers and men who drive too fast and bodies that fail for no reason. I have been practicing not being able to save her every second of her life. Vale Theron's eyes narrowed. Ellie leaned forward. But listen carefully. The chamber seemed to lean with her. This week, I watched James Whitfield die knowing he would never reach his children again. Sarah's face remained above them. He knew there would be birthdays without him. Bad dreams without him. First heartbreaks without him. He knew his little boy might look at photos one day and feel guilty for not remembering enough. Ellie's hand trembled once around the thermos. He did not use his children as chains around the living. Vale Theron said nothing. He used his last breath to give them something clean. Drass's eyes lifted. Ellie looked straight through the projection of her daughter and into Vale Theron. If you touch Sarah, you will not prove she is my weakness. Her voice dropped. You will prove you had to threaten a child because a nurse would not kneel. The broadcast carried the sentence into every human room. And something happened on Earth that the ascendancy instruments could measure but not name. People stood up. In shelters. In hospitals. In barracks. In kitchens. In dormitories. In funeral homes. In places where no one had known what to do with their fear until a tired nurse gave it a shape. Sarah Marsh stood too, tears running down her face, one hand covering her mouth. Vale Theron looked away from Ellie for half a second toward the planetary response data. Only half a second. Enough. Drass saw the third mistake. The commander had used the daughter to make the mother smaller. Instead, he had made the whole planet feel like her family. Vale Theron removed Sarah's image. He did it without looking at Drass. That was the fourth mistake. The young analyst noticed because he had started watching what the commander avoided. The chamber had been built to study human weakness, but every sequence was now producing data on ascendancy failure instead. Ellie sat back slowly. Her face had not recovered. That mattered. She had not become stone. Her daughter had hurt her exactly where Vale Theron intended. She had simply refused to let pain become instruction. Vale Theron returned to the center of the floor. Enough indirect pressure. The words were clean. Too clean. The projection above the chamber shifted to Earth again. Not as a distant blue sphere this time. Closer. Cities visible. Weather systems turning. Night lights glowing across continents like scattered embers. Vale Theron raised his hand. Your planet survives by permission. Across the tiers, Ascendancy officers lifted their heads. This was familiar territory. No philosophy. No grief. No daughter. Just extinction held above a species like a blade. We will destroy your world, Vale Theron said. Every human. Every hospital. Every child. Every grave. Every hand you have ever held. Gone. Ellie looked at Earth. The chamber waited for the human mind to do what other minds had done under the same sentence. Bargain. Collapse. Beck. The first tear moved down Ellie's cheek. She did not wipe it away. Vale Theron stepped closer. Now answer with precision. Ellie picked up the thermos cup. There was almost nothing left inside. She tilted it, drank the last cold mouthful of tea, and placed the cup back onto the lid with a soft click. Then she set the thermos on the floor beside her chair. Carefully. Like she was settling in for a long night. Think high, she said. The translator hesitated. Then rendered it. Okay. No one understood it at first. Even Earth did not. Ellie folded her hands in her lap. If that is what you're going to do, then I'll sit here while you do it. Vale Theron's hand remained raised. You accept annihilation? No. Then what do you accept? Ellie looked up at him. That some rooms can't be fixed. The answer struck Drass before it struck the commander. His slate lowered inch by inch. Ellie continued. I've been in rooms where the scan was final. Where the bleeding wouldn't stop. Where the family couldn't arrive in time. Where all the love in the world could not make the body stay. Her voice was quiet enough that the broadcast systems leaned into it. And still, someone had to stay in the room. Vale Theron's raised fingers separated slightly. Ellie looked past him at Earth. So if you burn it while we're watching each other. Don't pretend that makes you powerful. The projection of Earth turned slowly in the silence. You came here because you thought death was the threat. She shook her head once. Death is just the room. Drass stopped breathing. Ellie looked back at Vale Theron. What matters is who stays. For the first time in 847 campaigns, Vale Theron's hand did not fall. It remained in the air, holding an order his body could no longer deliver. Not because the weapon failed. Because the question had changed. He had come to prove that humans needed hands because they were weak. Now the entire chamber was watching a nurse offer one to the end of the world. Vale Theron lowered his hand by 1 inch. Only one. But every officer in the Ascendancy chamber saw it. Drass saw it first because he had stopped watching the weapon grids and started watching the space between command and obedience. The order still waited in the system. Earth still hung inside the targeting field. One thought from Vale Theron could reduce the planet to heat and ash. But the thought would not complete. Ellie Marsh sat beneath the pale light with her empty thermos beside her shoe, hands folded, face wet, breathing steady through exhaustion no empire had manufactured. She was not winning. That was what broke the room. She had no army in the chamber. No hidden fleet. No final weapon buried under the moon. No ancient human protocol waiting to activate. She had brought nothing with her except a night shift, a dying woman's blessing, and tea gone cold. And still, the commander of 847 victories could not give the final word. Vale Theron turned away from her. Explain this, he said. Drass did not answer quickly. The old version of him would have. The analyst who wrote the Earth report would have reached for terminology. Attachment dependency. Grief leverage. Maternal vulnerability. Terminal care conditioning. Those words now looked childish on his slate. Sir, Drass said, the report was wrong. Vale Theron went still. Drass swallowed, then continued. I wrote that attachment was their weakness. You did. It is not. The tiers above them remained silent. Drass looked at Ellie. She looked smaller now than when she had arrived. More tired. More human. That made the conclusion worse. It is their structure, Drass said. They attach at arrival. They attach at departure. They assign witnesses to helplessness. They build entire professions around remaining beside bodies that cannot repay them. Vale Theron's eyes shifted toward the thermos. Drass followed the look. She was not chosen because she was weak, he said. She was chosen because she practices the thing we never studied. And what is that? Drass's voice changed. Not louder. Less protected. Staying. No one moved. Ellie closed her eyes for a moment, not from fear, but because the word had landed somewhere even she had not defended. Vale Theron looked back at Earth. 847 civilizations, he said. His voice had lost its ceremonial edge. Yes, sir. We recorded their wars. Yes. Their surrender points. Yes. Their collapse behaviors. Yes. Vale Theron turned slowly toward the tiers of ascendancy officers. When they were born, who received them? Dras did not answer. The question moved through the chamber like something alive. Vale Theron looked down at his own hands, long and black under the pale light. When they died, he said, who remained? This time Dras answered. No one, sir. The words did not echo. They fell. Vale Theron stood very still. For the first time, Ali saw something in his face that did not belong to command. Not sorrow. Not yet. Something earlier. The confusion of a being discovering an empty room inside himself and realizing it had always been there. Ali pushed herself up from the chair. No guard stopped her. She picked up the thermos, screwed the cup back on and held it against her chest. Vale Theron watched the movement as if it were ceremonial. Ali took one step toward him. Not enough to threaten. Enough to speak without raising her voice. Jab tum pai dai hu, she asked, koi the wahan? The translator struggled, then rendered it cleanly. When you were born, was someone there? Vale Theron did not understand at first. Not the words. The relevance. Ellie waited. She had waited beside morphine pumps. Beside ventilators. Beside daughters trying to say sorry through tears. She could wait beside an empire learning the shape of a question. Vale Theron's mouth opened slightly. No answer came. Ellie nodded once as if that answer was complete. When your people die, she asked, is someone with them? The chamber did not breathe. Vale Theron's eyes moved once toward Dras. Dras lowered his gaze. Ellie looked around at the tiers, at the officers, at the analysts, at the silent machinery that had mistaken distance for wisdom. Hamar Yahan, she said softly, Koya Kela Nahiata. The translator followed. Where we come from, no one arrives alone. She lifted the thermos slightly. And Koya Kela Nahijada. No one leaves alone. Vale Theron's fingers curled inward. Not into a fist. Into something unfinished. Ellie turned then. No final challenge. No victory speech. No demand. She simply walked away from the chair, past the commander, past the analyst, toward the same light that had taken her from the hospice corridor. Before she entered it, Dras spoke. Eleanor Marsh. She stopped. He looked at her as if the slate in his hands had become useless. The patient in room 7, he said. The one you left. Ellie did not turn fully. Dot. Will she be alone? Ellie looked back then. Tired eyes. Wet face. Absolute certainty. No. The light took her. The chamber remained. Earth vanished from the targeting projection. Weapon grids closed one by one, not dramatically, not with triumph, but with a quiet embarrassment of tools returned and used. Hours later, Vale Theron recorded the mission log alone. No officers. No analysts. No broadcast. Only his voice inside the black archive. We came to study death. We had studied it across 847 civilizations. We believed we understood it completely. We chose their weakest. She came with a thermos of tea. We showed her the end of civilizations. She told us about a 34-year-old man who smiled when he closed his eyes. We threatened what she loved most. She did not become less. We told her we would destroy her world. She said okay. We have studied death for centuries. She had made peace with it by Tuesday. We have no word in our language for a species that holds hands at the beginning and at the end. We are adding one. Vale Theron stopped. For a long time the archive recorded only silence. Then he spoke the final word carefully, like a name being held for the first time. Human.
Some humans don't conquer through firepower. They conquer by refusing to leave anyone alone. Hope you enjoyed the story today. For more cinematic HFY stories, subscribe to Human Supremacy.